Welcome to Angels and Seerstones. I'm Christine.
And I'm Chris. So last week we watched the trailer for the upcoming film, The Heretic. It's about two sister missionaries who knock on the wrong guy's door and end up his prisoners and are forced to participate in a twisted game about whether they really have faith or not.
So we want to talk about our reactions to the trailer, more importantly about the experience of tracting as Latter-day Saint missionaries and the sometimes spooky stories that emerge from the experience. And we're going to tell you about how that exact scenario, encountering a psychopath, plays out in LDS folklore.
Latter-day Saints are a people of radical faith. We are a unique body of Bible-believing Christians. For us, the scriptural canon has been opened. The traditional sacraments have expanded. Our beliefs and practices are steeped in universalism, esotericism, and apocalypticism.
The Latter-day Saint tradition is a religion in which angels visit everyday people, and sometimes men and women see the divine in stones. In this podcast, we examine the lived religion of Latter-day Saints, our beliefs, and our stories.
We take seriously the whole gamut of Latter-day Saint experience. Join us, Christine and Chris Blythe,
two professional folklorists and Latter-day Saint converts,
as we openly discuss our faith while exploring the traditions of our chosen people.
Okay, picture it. Two Latter-day Saint sister missionaries are out tracting in some mountainside city, up and down the hillside and city roads with their bicycle underfoot or in hand. They stop strangers on the street.
Hi, good afternoon, ma'am. Are you interested in learning about our Savior, Jesus Christ? Hi. Good afternoon. Hi, are you? My name is Sister Barnes, and oh my gosh.
But as many of our Latter-day Saint listeners know all too well, few stop to listen. Suddenly, the sky becomes overcast and heavy with rain. The sisters persist, making their way towards a charming bungalow nestled in the tail end of a pathway blanketed with trees. A man answers the door.
Are you interested in learning more about the Church of Jesus Christ?
Come on in.
Not so fast.
We can't come inside unless another woman is present.
My wife is home. Does that count?
Great.
You like pie?
Yeah.
My wife has pie in the oven.
Oh, my wife is home, he assures them, leading them to the living room couch. All seems picture perfect.
I could tell that you are a very spiritually curious person.
I think it is good to be religious, to find your faith in a doctrine you actually believe.
Well, our work here is done.
Now, I will go and check on the pie.
That is, until the sisters realize that perhaps the stranger has more sinister intentions. The doors lock and the lights dim.
So sleep, silent angel.
Now, both Christine and I are returned missionaries, and I think we agree this movie looks awesome. The trailer was pure nostalgia, and it was just a couple minutes long. I felt an immediate emotional response watching these young women try to approach people on the streets.
Yes, me too. I think it has so much potential. I think we have seen other strong representations of sister missionaries recently, like in HBO's Tokyo Vice. And I know I'm biased, but I think sister missionaries make truly compelling characters. Well-dressed young women who we assume are innocent, kind, and devout. Of course, they're the ideal victims in a story like this.
I think the portrayal of sister missionaries is actually much better than the way elders have been portrayed in recent works. I'm thinking of the Book of Mormon musical or the movie Missionary from several years ago, where an elder stalks a woman. And of course, even that's come a long way from the classic images of Latter-day Saint missionaries. The 1911 film, A Victim of the Mormons, has elders not being kidnapped, but kidnapping women. The 1922 film, Trapped by the Mormons, even has these missionaries having a sort of hypnotic power to seduce converts. The great BYU film scholar James Dark refers to this as the Mormon vampire motif.
For me, the best representation of an LDS missionary is probably The Other Side of Heaven. As you might recall, this is not a church film, but this is a Disney production, which makes it kind of neat.
Absolutely. I love it. The original God's Army and later Errand of Angels about sister missionaries are also really good movies. And of course, that these images speak to me isn't surprising. These were Latter-day Saint films. And let's not forget the RM and the best 2 years. Silly, of course, but designed to capture all that Missionaries nostalgia for those of us that wish we could go back for another round of door knocking.
Yes, and of course, some of these LDS productions are a little one-dimensional, maybe perhaps a little bit saccharine, but they get the job done. And like The Other Side of Heaven, Heretic isn't a Latter-day Saint-produced film. It's from Scott Beck and Brian Woods, the same filmmakers who did The Quiet Place. Liz Busby from the podcast Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree has pointed out that a producer named Julia Glaucy is also connected with Beck and Woods' company and is a BYU graduate. So my hope is that the trailer delivers on more complex representations, and as former LDS missionaries, that we'll be able to see ourselves in those characters.
I sure hope so. And of course, one of the reasons this film is so exciting to us is that it reminds us of the classic Latter-day Saint legend about the two sister missionaries who tracked into a serial killer. And guys, we already recorded this in a past episode. We're going to play it for you now.
There were these two sister missionaries serving in my mission, and they were out proselyting when they approached an old, decrepit house. I think the sisters felt some caution as they approached, but wanted to contact everyone in the particular neighborhood where they were tracting. So they knocked on the door, and a man answered. The sisters began telling him about the plan of salvation, but the homeowner seemed jittery. So they left, and the sisters continued down the road to grocery, where they actually found a wanted poster pinned to the wall with this man's photograph on it. It said something like, "Wanted Killer and Rapist." Of course, they were terrified and immediately contacted the authorities. And this is where it gets kind of crazy. While in custody, the police asked the man why he had spared the young girls' lives. The man replied, they were not alone, but had been accompanied by 3 large men.
This is from our 5th episode on Ted Bundy lore. If you want to check out the full episode, take a peek. Could the film end with the miraculous appearance of the 3 Nephites? I think there would be a way to do that in a film like this, but it's pretty unlikely. Christine, are you at all nervous that the representation of Latter-day Saints will actually be, well, awful? I'm thinking Book of Mormon musical awful.
I am a Mormon, and the Mormon trustees.
Or even Under the Banner of Heaven awful.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do think Heretic will probably end up being a story about blind obedience. It's drawing from a very common pop culture trope of Mormons in film and TV, and that is that we are a naive people. Honestly, it reminds me of that TikTok channel where the guy walks around BYU asking students questions like, would you rather die an excruciating death or watch a porn video? That's actually one of the questions, to which a fair number of students respond, death. It's going to be a movie about choices and the danger of blind or naive faith, I think.
Okay, I think that's an interesting possibility. It's a probability. In this case, Latter-day Saints would be a metaphor for a broader category of believers. Usually when we're portrayed in a film like this, it's about us in a particular, but it's often talking about conservatives or talking about religious believers in general.
Yeah, possibly. I think this genre of folklore exists, of course, outside of LDS settings. It reminds me of the legend that circulated after the Columbine shooting. A young girl was given the choice to either profess or deny her belief in God and was shot after refusing to reject her beliefs. As a young evangelical, this narrative was hugely influential on Christian youth who viewed this as an act of true discipleship. And it was a major part of Christian discourse in the mid-90s. I was asked this question many times as a young teen.
You're talking about your own youth as an evangelical.
Oh, absolutely. Please, listeners, if ever given the choice to sip coffee or be killed by some psychopath, do me a favor and enjoy the latte. I think God will take coercion into account. My simple plea to Hollywood is surprise us. Let's have this be an epic showdown between 2 spiritual warriors who outsmart their captor and burn the house down to the ground. Maybe the 3 Nephites appear at the end of the movie to simply congratulate the sisters of being baddies. Because in my version, this is a feminist retelling of that popular legend. The sisters, they've got this.
Wouldn't that be cool if sister missionaries are the heroes of the story and not just the victims? No police or 3 Nephites showing up to deliver them, but with some quick wit, they outsmart this psychopath.
Yes, this is the story we deserve. After all, we are starting to see more and more of these feminist revenge movies. So the villain of this film is cast as Hugh Grant, for those of you who don't know, which is funny because I always thought of Hugh Grant as a love interest in movies. You know, like Notting Hill or 9 Months or About a Boy.
Me too. You know, this might surprise you, but when I was in high school, sometimes when a girl thought I was cute, at least that's why I thought they would say this, they would tell me that I looked like Hugh Grant.
I guess I don't see the likeness.
Okay, Christine. But Grant has started to play the villain over and over again. We see this more and more recently. And of course, my favorite, Paddington 2.
Bye-bye there.
There's no question that Grant can play a decent villain, although usually a sillier figure than the psychopath he seems to be playing on Heretic. Although this seems to only play further into LDS Ted Bundy lore. For those of you who have distanced yourself from Bundy, you might not know that he was not only a good-looking guy, but he was also well-mannered and charming. It's actually what makes Bundy quite terrifying. So our initial response to the Heretic trailer was excitement. We were floored. We love a good mystery. We like a little horror, and of course we love LDS culture. We're folklorists, so we immediately recalled the popular Missionary legend that we just talked about. But as we watched responses online, we also began to notice a number of Latter-day Saints who were concerned that the movie might increase missionary anxiety and parent anxiety or paranoia.
The legends we talked about here in past episodes are really about easing parental anxiety. The sister missionaries are always safe in the end, but it's true, this could have some negative repercussions. I want to switch gears. I want to talk about the experience that these filmmakers are trying to reproduce, knocking on doors as a missionary. It's largely monotonous and it's uneventful. If you're lucky, your companion is someone you get along with and who likes to shoot the breeze. Then it could be fun even. I remember one companion who, to entertain us, would do way overly dramatic introductions when someone came to the door.
We have traveled 60 miles, and this is the first place at which we've been impressed to stop.
We have come to proclaim that the true church of Jesus Christ has been restored to the earth.
Oh, please come in.
I preferred a simple, "Hi, we're missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we're out here talking about God. Do you have a minute?" And my hope was they wouldn't slam the door in my face before I got done explaining who we were. In my 2 years of knocking doors in West Virginia, between 2004 and 2006, I had plenty of uncomfortable moments. I had a guy charge me. People light up a joint mid-lesson. Women show up to the door and only a towel. I taught a woman who believed she was possessed and hissed during our conversation. But most of these experiences made for good stories than any actual danger. Over the years, you do run into some people who are struggling with severe mental illness, maybe even paranoia. We taught one guy who came to believe we were on his property late into the night, messing with his things. And of course, the next time he showed up, he was outraged.
Yeah, tracting can be an interesting experience for sure. So we collected 3 stories. Well, 4. One of them is from me. The others are from missionaries who felt a spiritual impression that they were in danger while out spreading the word.
Let's start with a story that actually doesn't include a spiritual component, but captures the sorts of stories that missionaries tell each other about potential dangers while tracting. This is from one of our listeners, Tyler Snow, who served his mission in Ohio. I served in the Ohio-Cincinnati mission from 2000 to 2002. In my first area in the fall of 2000, I served in southern Ohio, in the rural area covering Portsmouth, Ohio. We received a request for a free Lamb of God video, and the address was in the middle of nowhere, approximately 30 miles from our apartment. We drove to the house, and it was a farmhouse, again in the middle of nowhere. We parked near the house and saw that the front door was wide open. Above the door, painted in red across the front facade of the house, were these ominous words: "If I catch you, you die." As I remember it, we saw a couple of farm animals wandering in and out of that open front door. It felt like a scene that you only see in an end-of-the-world type movie. Neither of us wanted to go up to that door to deliver the free video, so my companion got out of the car and launched the videotape into that open door, and then we rushed to get out of there. I started to back up the car, and suddenly we saw a man had come from out of nowhere and was standing just feet away from my companion. He did not seem all there and looked out of his mind. He didn't say anything to us. He just stood there looking into the distance while standing a few feet away from my companion. My companion jumped into the car and we sped off. The whole thing was pretty freaky for a couple of young missionaries, but it also made for an experience that I'll never forget.
Wow. You know, I had a similar experience on my mission. And of course, I believe these stories are sincere, even life-saving promptings that missionaries receive during their service. But I also recognize that the imagination is actively influencing the way missionaries, and certainly I viewed the landscape in my interactions with the people. I'll share what for me is now an embarrassing missionary story, but a great example of how the discomfort and unpredictability of knocking doors might lend itself to an experience colored by fear. Here's my story. It was growing dark in a small countryside city in Tohoku region of Japan. My companion and I were in an unfamiliar neighborhood, and the road was leading us further away from the sure path back home. My companion commented on an eerie feeling she was having, and I was certainly susceptible to the suggestion. The home seemed to sit differently in this neighborhood. More dirt than road led to each door. The home was a bit run down and not quite in conformity with the others positioned along the main road, a road which we now wholly departed from. We decided to ignore the urge and agreed to knock a single door. A small dog pounced against the door, snarling and angry. We were startled, but continued to wait for the owner's response. Down at the other end of the home, we heard an unwelcome voice, a sliding door pulled open by an old, white-haired woman with scolding eyebrows and perfectly whitened pupils. She was angry, and the appearance of her blank stare and sharp greeting sent us running from the porch onto our bikes and pedaling down the road. When my adrenaline settled, I realized that the whitened pupils were likely not an indication of incarnated evil, but a blind woman who was rightfully irritated that two young women had disturbed her dog some hours into nightfall.
So it sounds like you become skeptical of your experience.
Well, I do want to acknowledge that sometimes our negative experiences might have something to do with our own cultural expectations. In the same way that a campfire or a cemetery or a sleepover create the perfect setting for an eerie tale, so does the mission field. A winding road, a darkened street, an unknown visitor approaching the door. Our fear is intended to keep us present to potential dangers, even when there are none. And all of those legends we know about possessions, serial killers, angry retractors, well, those are filed away in the back of our mind when we knock a door.
And that's not always a bad thing. There have been kidnappings. A woman kidnapped and sexually assaulted an elder in England in 1977. And there's the famous Saratov kidnapping for ransom in 1998. A series of missionaries were murdered in the American South in the 19th century, the most famous of them being Joseph Standing. In 1974, a man named Robert Elmer Cleason murdered two elders in Austin. Two missionaries were murdered in Bolivia in 1989. In 2020, a man broke into the apartment of two sister missionaries and stabbed them in their sleep. They survived, fortunately. Sister missionaries were gang raped in South Africa in 2006. During that same year, a missionary in Virginia was murdered after witnessing a crime. You can come up with a lot of these random examples, but remember, they occur over the course of many years, over many, many thousands of missionaries.
Yeah, these are terrible. I mean, absolutely heartbreaking. And so there really is a danger out there. Let's share two stories. This from Jason McDonald. He was serving in the Fort Lauderdale, Florida mission, which is my personal stomping grounds. It's where I was raised. And then Michael Zatar. Both of these are former missionaries recalling a moment that they felt impressed to flee, perhaps a dangerous situation.
So we're going to begin with Jason McDonald.
Yeah. I had been on my mission for about 18 months when the story took place. I was in the Florida Fort Lauderdale mission from 1994 to 1996. And at this time, I was in an area kind of around the Palm Beach area. And my companion and I, we really had nothing going on. I was training a new missionary, and we had gone about a month without really teaching a discussion, and we were really just kind of discouraged. It was really bordering on depression at this point. And so it was kind of late one evening. We knocked on a door, and there was a man. I would probably say he was in his mid-30s, and he just kind of let us in. I mean, we were really was really a kind of unexpected event to be let in. And my companion got really excited, as you can imagine. He was brand new missionary and hadn't been in many doors to that point. But as we sat down, he put us on his couch and we sat there. I just started to get this really kind of antsy, anxious feeling. And every minute that passed, my anxiety just kind of grew and grew. My companion was doing most of the talking. As the senior missionary, I kind of felt like I should be doing the talking, but he was doing all the talking because all I just really felt was just this deep anxiety and really kind of growing into a fear that I needed to leave. All I could think about, I kept thinking about these stories that we'd passed around as missionaries about someone being attacked, some elder or sister being attacked or assaulted by someone who let them in to their home. And I was just terrified that this was going to happen to us. So at one point, the man excuses himself to get a glass of water, get us glasses of water. And while he was gone, I told my companion, we've got to leave. I mean, we just got to get out of here. And when this fellow came back, he handed us the cups of water. My companion just drank his down. It's kind of a muggy Florida evening, but I just wouldn't touch it. I was just terrified that he was going to drug us or do something to us, that he'd slip something in the drink. So I just made an excuse that we had to get out of there. We had another appointment or something, and we just left. And my companion, I mean, he was upset. Like he really was hopeful that this was going to turn into something. But I just wouldn't back down. I said something was wrong. Something kind of compelled me to get out of that house. And so we started walking down the street, and my anxiety just kind of faded. And pretty much by the time we turned around the corner, I pretty much felt normal again. I don't know how to interpret that story now. I really don't. I mean, I am probably more cynical than I was as a 20-year-old missionary to think that someone was out to cause me harm. I'm not unmindful of the possibility. I mean, I know that there have been missionaries who were kidnapped and even killed, right, by people. But that is such a rare, uncertain possibility. I don't know. I honestly don't know what to make of it at this point. I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it was my own kind of part of me thinks maybe I was just so surprised at being let in that something must be wrong. Like something can't be right if something good is happening in this area, right? But I also just think maybe there was something wrong because I'm familiar with those stories from primary. The little boy who didn't go in the shed because of some warning, and he never found out why shouldn't have gone into the shed, but he'd been protected from something, obviously. So I'm mindful of those possibilities too.
So these stories can be a bit unsatisfying, right? We've all heard them in redundancy. We don't have a climax, a clear picture of what the missionary was being protected from. But that might be the charm of these types of stories, is that we don't know, because the tragedy is completely avoided. All right, let's listen to another from Michael Zatar.
I served in the Russia-Moscow mission starting from November 2003 until December 2005. I was actually on splits in a city of the mission I was in called Tver. The elder I was with is Elder Sanders. And we would do this thing where we would try not to go back to home all day. We would be out all day, not go back for lunch, not go back for dinner, really. So we planned the day around certain kind of activities, and sometimes those meant trying to track inactive members. As we go to the inactive members' apartments, we wouldn't always have a lot of success, but we would do it in hopes of dropping off the Liahona or something, anything. I think we had the wrong address this night, and there are laws in place and rules about this in the mission, and we were, if not breaking, we were certainly bending rule by one. It was after 8 o'clock, and two, justifying it. Oh, we're just on our way home. It's right here anyway. We stop in, and all of that. And so I want to preface with it was a faith building experience, but all the same, there are reasons for rules. And anyway, so we had planned that we would try to visit this family that hadn't been in the branch in a long time. We had what we think would be the right address. We get in the building, and the building's like a 7-story building, but we're on the 5th level. of the building, knock on the door, nothing, knock a second time, and we hear a voice. Or at least I did. I mean, I'd have to ask Elder Sanders what he thinks about it all these years later. But it was a little girl. It was a very young girl voice. And it just said, "Run, he has a knife." And it was just like in a movie where, you see the guys bug-eyed look at each other. We looked at each other. I don't know how bug-eyed, we looked at each other and and immediately we just knew to move. And so how loud the voice was it the voice the same for both of us? We thought so. We actually told each other, yeah, we're pretty sure we heard the same voice. Where it came from, inside the apartment or not, I feel like it wasn't inside the apartment. I felt like it was right in between our shoulders. And I was the one on the right side. It was right over here. And so anyway, we book it. And I don't remember going down the stairs. We were down fast. He tried to jump the last flight of stairs, which is like half of a floor worth, probably like 8 stairs. He missed, slipped on the last one, falls, rolls, and he sprained his ankle. So I grab him, and we head outside. And the thing about access into the buildings, they don't have access off the main street where the lights are. It's in the back, and it's dark. And so you have to run around the corners of the building to get into the street. And so that's kind of what we did. And as we turned around, we did see a man standing there who looked like he'd been chasing us. We don't know what was in his hand. We're assuming it's a knife because we felt impressed. And just standing and didn't do anything. And we kind of stood and didn't do anything for a minute to see what he would do. And then we just walked off. Yeah, I mean, that's basically the story. I mean, we went back to in Trevita. I don't know if anything's changed, but in those days, we lived in a hotel. As Americans, we weren't allowed to live in an apartment. So we get back to our hotel, and in the hotel, the whole district lives. So there was 6 elders and 2 sisters living in the hotel. And we had a fun story to tell.
In this story, the danger is apparent. Elder Zatar and the companion come in contact with a man wielding a knife. Terrifying. This story is especially compelling because the spiritual prompting is shared. They both hear the voice. And you can hear by Michael's telling of the story that this experience continues to be evidence of God's reality in his own life. And there you have it. As Latter-day Saints, we emphasize impressions from the Holy Ghost, whether the danger is suggested or apparent, because we understand that a prompting is a testament of God's love for you, for his children.
This is unquestionably a big part of our spiritual stories. The filmmakers involved in Heretic may or may not be aware of this tradition. It's not hard to imagine it, though. Our young people literally travel the world talking to strangers. And so every missionary has some experience that they can relate to this basic theme of either being in danger or certainly feeling danger. Of course, the great difference between these stories and what I suspect about the movie Heretic is that these stories are designed to remove fears. They're designed to ease the concern of parents who send their children to far-off lands. Whereas Heretic is probably designed to create an entertaining experience of horror, adding fears rather than trying to placate those fears.
Yeah, I guess that's a pretty big difference. Either way, we plan on watching Heretic. Maybe we should get together at a theater.
We'll be there. Send us a note if you want to come watch it with us.
We just need to go home.
I won't keep you if you wish to leave. But I want you to choose which door to go through based on your faith.
What does this have to do with us leaving?
Everything.
I think that we're being studied.